Today, I am joined by Jeremy Saulnier, writer and director of his new film Rebel Ridge, which hits Netflix on September 6th. Jeremy, I saw it twice. I loved it. Um, First, I want to talk about the trailer. When the trailer dropped, I saw a ton of viral tweets and comments on YouTube calling this Black Rambo. And I'm curious, is that a comparison you expected? Is it one you wanted? And just what do you make of that at large?
Oh, I let that be out in the space. I certainly didn't call it that when I was making it, and nor did
It's a
Aaron.
good pitch. It's a good pitch.
It's all good, and I just kept true to the narrative and the character, and Aaron Pierre did the same. And when it comes to the viral nature of certain lines or labels, I really enjoy actually sitting back and letting it all unfold. But you will not catch me injecting myself into that conversation.
No, 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 of course not. But I'm more curious of when you make a film like this, are you awaiting the Rambo comps? Like, is that something you knew would come?
Oh, so
That add pressure to it.
the Rambo element, yeah, I actually was referring more to Western genre. Terry Richmond, played by Aaron Pierre, rides into town, not on a horse, but on a bicycle. And I was thinking Eastwood,
You know,
right?
it's funny. This weekend I just watched Unforgiven for the first time. So I'm right. So I'm locked in there with you. I know, I know, I know.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So go
first
ahead. I'm sorry.
time. Wow. Um, but then, so as I sort of explored opportunities to find, new paths for a narrative, and this civil asset forfeiture practice was universally reviled, and I thought it'd be a great inciting incident. So when I kind of like got this character in my head and came across this perfect inciting incident and realized that this would be pitting one guy against a small town police force, then of course, yes, totally Rambo, here we go. But not Rambo, First Blood,
First blood. Right.
which was retroactively renamed Rambo
Right.
First Blood, but none of I don't really revere any other of the Rambo films, but First Blood to me is near and dear, not just thematically, but texturally, the anamorphic cinematography, the way they infuse the location and the place into the storytelling, the acting, the chops, how real it felt on a texture level. That's what I was like definitely referring to more so than the character, because Terry Richmond and John Rambo are quite different as far as their demeanor, their history. They both share a military past that's very different.
You actually teed me up for something that I liked about this film the most, and that's the inciting incident, which is the first scene. And it sort of throws you into the plight and the chaos of the character right off the bat. And it sets the tone for the whole film. That's not really a trick I see a lot. At what, when you wrote this script, did that idea to sort of insight right away come to you at first, or did it happen along the way? And why did you choose to go that route?
So I'm very linear in how I write and think. So that was the first image. It's like guy on a bike does this. There's an intervention. Boom, we're smashed out of it. So like Iron Maiden being the opening track, that is was I think in the very first draft of the script. That's that track. Because Bruce Dickinson's vocals like give you this kind of like amazing, majestic metal rally cry, and then boom, we pull the rug out from underneath our guy. It's quiet. You hear police radios, and like we're thrust into it. And I don't usually do that. I'm more into the slow burn. Like how do we sort of like ease our way into a story? But sometimes as a filmmaker, you're just like, I want something new, guys. I want to just, what if I do this? And it excited me. So that was very much the first image. And I was able to carry it out linearly. And I researched like traffic stops. I researched, I had a legal consultant come on board, part of my kids' class, another father at the school, like just reached out to experts that I knew within my own inner circle and just let that research and expertise sort of drive how I carve that path.
You again touched on a big note that I have here, and that was slow burn, which this film isn't necessarily, but I think in some scenes it really zones in on that. My favorite scene of the film is the slow reveal of what McMap means. I love the little Wi-Fi trick just to really add to the tension. What are some of the biggest pillars you think of creating effective tension are, which is ultimately drama, which is ultimately the point of this whole thing that we're doing?
Oh, that it's so hard. I certainly really enjoy creating tension. I respond to it as a viewer as well. A lot of it is, I think, information deprivation, where you're holding back certain things. You're using time and space and sound to kind of to heighten the experience. Um, and I do it maybe like again, it's hard for me to critique how or even like reverse engineer how I do it, but I like little details. I like to hear a fax machine and like have the stillness of an office and how that slowly is disrupted and how we inject some information and pull it back a bit, diffuse, and then misdirect and all these things. They do come naturally as far as like I enjoy the process of writing dialogue, and I try to be very clear about everything, every word spoken between the characters has to have some sort of a back and forth. It has to either have a push or a pull or add something new. So you feel like either jousting or we are building to something. Then it's all sort of carried out when Don Johnson comes out of the station to meet Aaron Pierre as the chief and Terry, and then I get to have this tense, quiet, like 5 minute dialogue scene, and I'm grateful that
Which
that's
was incredible. The way that you wrote that script, the way it's bouncing back and forth between outside and inside, and the way that they're talking about um, the word where like pace. What's pace
yeah,
called?
pace. Yeah.
No, but what's the word for those?
Oh,
Like the codes?
the acronyms.
Yes.
Yeah,
How
yeah,
they're
yeah,
going back and forth, and he's like, and E stands for, and then it cuts
yeah,
back, and she's like, McMap, and I'm like, oh no, dude. Um, Let me
yeah.
see.
Yeah,
First of
like
all,
no, yeah.
what? Go ahead, Jeremy. Go ahead.
But that's it. It's like building the oh shit factor there was like an absolute joy.
I could tell, and that, as I said, that to me is my favorite scene in the film. The writing. I'm trying to be a writer myself, and the writing just comes alive there. As soon as you did like I'm calling it a trick, the Wi-Fi trick. I already knew, like, oh, I see exactly what
Yeah.
he was trying to do here, and it worked. Even though I'm hyper aware of those type of things, it
Oh
still
yeah.
worked for me. Um, let's see. Okay. Um, I actually want to talk about. So we talked about First Blood. I see comparisons as well to Walking Tall, Reacher, and these are generally stories about one man taking on a corrupt small town. What about that narrative seems to be so compelling? Even this year there was more of a gonzo version of this kind of story with David Ayers, The Beekeeper. And I'm curious what you think that story appeals to such a wide audience. Like I personally think is there's a part of all of us that feels like we're under that boot. So seeing
Yeah.
somebody rip the fucking shoe off and throw the boot back at the person is always going to work.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like wish fulfillment as far as, in whatever system wherever that boot comes from. It can be very small scale, like at work, in the confines of your house. It can be societal. It can be huge as part of these corrupt systems, international systems. Who knows? But I was just tapping into that very human experience. Um, and certainly, I was coming off a hard run of work and maybe saw some people, in my systems that I'm interfacing with that I had some issues with, whatever it is, like not to be fully disgruntled, but we all have issues. And it's really a pleasure to be able to cathartically sort of expunge that energy and put it somewhere productive, right? Because I definitely do not know Terry Richmond's experience. Like I don't know what it's like to walk in those shoes. What I can do is a ton of research, a lot of listening, and inject that into, fuse that with my personal experience, just about how I can, as a writer, you're very empathetic. You have to sort of observe people and glean from them information, not just for like cool dialogue, but how they interact and how they interact not only with you but within these systems. So it was very natural to me. I had energy in me. I needed to get out, and this is a really cool way to do it. Now, in my case, I'm actually not Terry Richmond. I'm somebody else. I don't tell people who I am, but I'm not the guy.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I have
Now
my own
I'll
role.
try to think who you were. Another thing I loved about this film is the way that it plays with the action hero one liner. Okay. Some of them are up there with the genre's most classic, i.e., and I'm gonna ring off the quotes here. I gotta haunt these motherfuckers myself. Some are written as if I felt they were meant to be comedic, but delivered deadly seriously. Like, where's the fucking cat food? Some, I think, are even a meta commentary on itself, as he says, did I put too much sauce on that? And then my probably the favorite one that I had was when you subvert expectations of it. And this is like the money line in the trailer where he's like, nah. So I'm just curious, like, I don't really have a question, but was that an intentional sort of not quite gimmick, but a little bit of fun that you were having with the genre's conventions?
It is the most fun I've allowed myself as a writer to, I personally do not gravitate towards movies being too self-referential. I don't like it when, because I'm a purist. Like this is like my religion. So when a movie is so self-aware that it's a movie and gives you a big wink, I don't like that.
Well, then I would suggest not going to see Deadpool 3.
Well, hey, I might like that as an audience member, but as a filmmaker, I want to keep the sanctity of the story intact. That being said, um, it was a little more fun to let Terry rip, and there's just natural opportunities for some, what clearly some one-liners, and I think you highlighted all of them, and it was fun to go there,
He,
and
and he smashes them right out of the park.
yeah, and also the viral line is but then I was like, nah, and that was
That's so good,
uh,
dude.
and that was something that I wrote, and I'm proud of it. But Aaron Pierre, when he does like when he flips the phone, that was him
You can't
on
teach
one.
that stuff, right? You cannot teach that stuff.
Yeah,
That's
and
pure,
it,
just
it
like
was
yeah.
and it was one take. Like we had it. I had what I wanted. It was good. And the last take, he went, and I was like, holy shit! And that kind of physicality and not self knowledge of like, Aaron was so good about not doing big action or meeting those expectations as far as like because physically, oh, he can do like he can do the look and the posture that maybe some Hollywood execs would want out of him, but he was not going to do that. So the deadpan deliveries, the utmost seriousness, to me, it enhances the humor because you get to have that awesome line and that
But it
wit.
never feels cheap. It never
Yeah,
goes over that line of like rubbing your face in the fact that you enjoy this stuff.
yeah. And I was aware of it too. I almost cut some out, but then I was like, fuck it. I it works and it works. And let this movie have a little more fun than my others. Let
Mm.
this movie have its own place in my filmography. And let me not try to, you know, suffocate it with brutality and, and violence and that gut punch feeling, which I still stand by and love. And I have come to peace with all my movies, but this one gives people a lift. And part of that is having just a wee bit of fun, whether it be, Aaron or Don Johnson, having some, and also, these guys do have sharp wits. And so that's when they're talking a little shit back and forth, so be it.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've said it twice now, but that scene of the McNabb reveal where they're feeding into each other's next line about the shit eating Grant and so on and so forth. So I've got a bit of a long-winded one here, so follow
Okay.
along. as I touched on, I'm trying to be a writer myself, and something that I noticed in this film was the way that action scenes, like the way that you transition from tension to just it explodes, action, boom. And one of the things that have always confused me most is the process of taking an image from your mind's eye and putting it into words. And I particularly think of the shotgun reload, which I think is like the money shot of the trailer. And here is a compliment for the ages. It reminded me of Terminator 2, where Arnold's flipping the shotgun and you see it and you're just like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. I'm curious about, I guess, just the process of taking cool ideas and making them sound cool in words and sort of the bridge between those two things.
So writing, um, I mean, the process for action for me is very detailed. And I started this process. I have a whole stunt document that is like, this is how we're going to do it. Like, we're going to pay homage to all these disciplines and movies, but we're going to carve our own path. We're going to stay true. As I saw, martial arts disciplines as they're utilized in the real world, um, with definite exceptions to expert technique and disarming and flipping. Most of what I saw is sloppy grappling, brute force, go straight for whatever you're going for, whether it be to two hands on one, if it's a gun or a knife, and take him to the ground, knee on belly, whatever it is, it looks like just fucking wrestling. And so I wanted to make sure that I wasn't trying to compete on that amazing spectacle of like John Wick.
I knew, yep.
Um, and just like stay in my zone, which is like very terrestrial, very grounded, sloppy, like shirt pulling, prop work, sound effects, hand slapping, fighting for control. And the way I choreographed it was on the page. I had it very clear down to the moves. I would research what
So it
how you
all unfolds in your mind first.
totally. Then you're sitting there with a script and an amazing group of stunt members who are like, from Keith Willard, who's an ex-Navy SEAL, DEA agent. We had, Jericho Demman, who's an Army Ranger. We had Corey DeMeyers, who's a parkour champion. Then you make sure you're letting the experts weigh in, and they'll kindly offer like, hey, this is the move that you wrote. Like, how about this one instead? And they'll guide you through it. And it's my job to listen to them and allow their input, but fight for reality, because a lot of times stunt technicians are tasked with making shit look awesome, big, spectacular. And I have to pull them in a bit. And it's a very fun rapport that we have, because they'll offer me, we could have some crazy shit in this movie, but I was like, doesn't feel real enough for this movie. I'm not going for that. I don't want the wire work. I don't want two people sitting there doing this. It's this. It is,
which I really know, which you really notice too, right? Like the sort of bear hug technique. You don't see a lot in film, and I love the way that he uses that. I've got a rep here, so we've done a lot of sort of inside baseball, behind the camera stuff. I want to talk to you about your star. Tell me about casting Aaron Pierre, because he seems so uniquely suited to this role that I almost wonder how this film would have worked without him. And I don't, of course, mean that as a slight to you. What I mean, of course, is similar to Alan Ritchson in Reacher or The Rock in Walking Tall. When this dude strolls into town, absolutely massive, almost otherworldly handsome, you instantly find yourself asking, who the fuck is this guy? Where did he come from? And you could also buy the devastation that they bring with them. So I just want to give you the floor to sort of talk about casting him, how that came to be, what about his work surprised you? Because I think he's a star, man.
he's an absolute star, on screen and off. Dude's a hero. No shit. I mean, he kind of he saved production. Like, he was just like, and I cannot even imagine this film without him. Like, it's not just like, you know, brainwashing myself. Like, this is the only version. This is the only version. And I held a very firm line. Like, we faced some headwinds, this or that. Like, this film does not happen, does not move forward unless we find the real Terry Richmond, because everything was on his shoulders. He had to carry the whole film, with his charisma, with his physicality, with everything. So when I first heard of Aaron Pierre, it was my wife saw him on Underground Railroad, Barry
Mm.
Jenkins limited series. Got on a Zoom with Aaron through his agent, who's now good friend. Like 2 minutes in, done. Like I didn't originally think of Terry Richmond as a 6'3", 210 powerhouse as far as his ability to move, objects. But he on Underground Railroad, what you see is chops. And this guy
Mm.
can act. He can be subtle with a lot of gravity. And that's tough. When you can like just be there and have that kind of weight intellectually, emotionally, that's what I needed. It's not a big surprise when Terry Richmond can throw some across the room, but the way that Aaron conducts himself, he's the thoughtfulness, the generosity, the respect. Um, he is just an amazing collaborator, and the dedication, the reverence that he had for as he calls it, the text was embarrassing. You know, he would chime in once in a while with something about the vernacular, or, hey, Jeremy, I have a question about the deeper theme of this scene. Am I correct in thinking it means this? And I'll be like, well, yeah, I think there's certainly some of that. And he's like, so I'll do this instead if you don't mind. And it's just a yes. He picks and he chooses when to inject as his own self and artist, and he does it with this sort of delicate demeanor, but very purposeful, from the heart, and it's just undeniable. He cares sometimes more about the film than I do, as far as because you can get worn down as a director, and what you need is someone as an actor who can be their own caretaker for the role. Again, to not fall into action movie tropes, to make sure he maintains the integrity. And so our rapport on set is just, it's almost effortless. And we did things like breath work, because the physicality, the emotionality, like him on screen is so compelling that sometimes my only direction would be like, awesome, let's go again. And before we roll, let's do like 10 deep breaths. you know, he's a dream.
I know I made a joke about Deadpool 3. I don't know if you're a comic book guy, but I think that this film is going to have people begging for him to be cast as John Stewart as the Green Lantern. He even already has the bright glowing green eyes. Jeremy, this film was sick. I watched it twice. I'm going to watch it a third time. It hits Netflix on September 6th. I think you touched on it a bit. This will probably be your widest reaching film. Congrats, man. It's awesome. So are you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Cheers, brother. Thank you, team.